bit me! I need... It's two.
I found you.
Maeva. Hold on. I have you.
Kale.
No! It can't be! You're him! You're the Alpha King!
Maeva had always believed survival belonged to people who planned better than everyone else. Every choice she made, every path she walked, every risk she accepted, had been measured, calculated, controlled. For 6 long years, that belief had never failed her. Until the morning she climbed the oldest tree anyone in the kingdom refused to name. The villagers called it cursed. Hunters avoided it. Even seasoned herbalists pretended it did not exist. Maeva ignored every warning. Not because she was fearless, because her mother was dying. The medicine keeping her alive had stopped working months ago. Only one herb remained powerful enough to slow the illness. Dusk Fern. Rare. Fragile. Growing only in the highest branches of a forgotten tree deep inside the eastern forest. She knew the stories. She knew something guarded it. She simply believed she could be faster. She packed only what she needed. A small satchel. A pair of scissors. Glass jars. Nothing extra. She even promised herself she would harvest only enough to save her mother. Nothing more. Nothing greedy. That was her final calculation. As she climbed higher, the forest became strangely silent. No birds. No insects. Even the wind seemed reluctant to touch the branches. Most people would have climbed back down. Maeva reached even higher. The freshest dusk fern glowed softly beneath the morning light. Exactly where she expected. Exactly where no one else dared climb. She smiled for the first time that morning. One careful cut. That was all she needed. The scissors closed around the first stem. Then, the air changed. Not with sound. Not with movement. With presence. Every instinct inside her screamed before her eyes found it. Curled around the neighboring branch. Perfectly hidden against the bark. A massive Guardian Serpent slowly opened its ancient golden eyes. It had been watching her the entire time. And in that single terrifying heartbeat, Maeva realized something she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, her calculations had failed. The serpent struck before she could breathe. A burning pain exploded above her ankle. Her fingers lost their grip. The world spun. Branches shattered beneath her body. The sky disappeared. And then, darkness. Pain arrived before she could breathe. Maeva crashed through branch after branch, each impact stealing what little strength remained in her body. The forest floor rushed toward her. Then, silence. For several endless seconds, she could not move. The sky above blurred into patches of gray through the towering canopy. Her lungs finally remembered how to breathe. Every inhale felt like broken glass. Her fingers tightened instinctively. Something was still in her hand. One small cluster of dusk fern. She almost laughed. She had risked her life for a single handful of leaves. Slowly, she forced herself onto one elbow. The moment she tried to stand, agony ripped through her right leg. Her ankle collapsed beneath her. She fell back against the roots of the ancient tree. Only then did she notice the bite. 2 deep punctures just above her boot. Dark crimson spread beneath the torn leather. The skin around the wound had already begun turning an unnatural shade of violet. Venom. Fast. Far faster than she had expected. She wrapped a trembling hand around her ankle. Pointless. The numbness was already climbing higher. Calf. Knee. Soon. Her entire leg felt strangely warm. Maeva closed her eyes for only a second. No. She could not afford that. Think. Always think. The nearest village. Almost an hour away. Even if she crawled, she would never reach it. No one knew she had come here. Her mother believed she would return before sunset. Tomorrow, someone might begin searching. Tomorrow would be too late. For the first time since childhood, Maeva had no solution. The realization terrified her more than the venom. She opened her mouth to call for help. Help! The forest swallowed her voice without mercy. Nothing answered. Not even an echo. She tried again. Only silence. Her vision wavered. The trees tilted strangely before straightening again. The poison had reached her thigh. She gripped the dusk fern tighter. If she died, at least she would not die empty-handed. A sudden sound broke through the stillness. Hoofbeats. Slow. Steady. Unhurried. Maeva froze. Had the venom begun creating illusions? The sound came again, closer this time. Branches shifted somewhere beyond the clearing. Then, a magnificent black stallion emerged between the trees, as if the forest itself had stepped aside. Its rider sat perfectly still, broad shoulders, dark cloak, an unmistakable air of authority that required no crown. The horse stopped several yards away. Neither of them spoke. The stranger's sharp gray eyes swept across the clearing. The broken branches, the ancient tree, the single bundle of dusk fern clutched against her chest. Finally, the bite on her ankle. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise. Recognition. He already understood exactly what had happened. Maeva searched desperately for words. Her voice barely escaped. The Guardian. The man dismounted without answering. Every movement was calm, controlled, as though panic simply did not exist in his world. He knelt beside her, much larger than she had imagined, yet strangely careful, like someone afraid of causing even more pain. The venom. His deep voice was quiet. How long? Maybe 20 minutes. He studied the wound. His jaw tightened, only slightly, enough for Maeva to notice. She had spent her entire life reading people. This man rarely revealed emotion, which meant whatever he had just seen was worse than she realized. Without another word, he slipped one arm beneath her knees and another behind her back. Maeva instinctively tried to protest. I can't know. The answer was gentle, absolute. He lifted her effortlessly. She hated how weak she felt, hated needing anyone. Yet, for the first time in years, she allowed someone else to carry the weight. He settled her carefully onto the horse before climbing behind her. One powerful arm held the reins. The other kept her from falling. Stay awake. She forced a faint smile. I'll try. No. His voice remained calm. You will. Something about the certainty in those two words made her believe him. The horse surged forward. Trees blurred past. The poison spread higher. The world grew heavier. She fought to keep her eyes open. What's your name? He asked. Maeva. A brief silence. Then, Kale. Nothing more. No titles. No explanations. Just a name. Maeva leaned weakly against him as the forest disappeared behind them. She did not know who he was. She did not know where he was taking her. She only knew one thing. If this stranger had arrived, even 1 minute later, she would already be dead. Ahead, beyond the trees, massive stone walls slowly rose against the horizon. An enormous kingdom. A fortress unlike anything she had ever seen. And as the great gates began opening, Maeva noticed the guards dropping to one knee before the man behind her. Only then, with darkness swallowing the edges of her vision, did one impossible thought cross her mind. Who had just rescued me? Maeva woke to the scent of unfamiliar herbs. The sharp sting of crushed mint. Wild sage. Something bitter she could not identify. For a brief moment, she believed she had died. Then pain reminded her she had not. Her ankle throbbed with every heartbeat. The venom was still inside her. Only slower now. She blinked against the afternoon light. Stone walls surrounded the room. Tall windows overlooked a sprawling courtyard. Shelves lined with glass bottles, dried roots, and carefully labeled remedies filled one side of the chamber. This was no village healer's cottage. Whoever lived here possessed knowledge few people ever acquired. Footsteps approached. An elderly woman entered carrying a shallow wooden bowl filled with steaming water. Her silver hair was braided neatly behind her head. Her movements were efficient, confident. She did not waste a single gesture. You are awake. It was not relief. It was observation. Maeva tried to sit. The room spun violently. A gentle but firm hand pressed her shoulder back. Not yet. Maeva obeyed. She disliked obeying anyone. Today, she lacked the strength to argue. The healer carefully removed the bandage wrapped around her ankle. The bite looked worse than she expected. Dark veins stretched upward beneath her skin. The wound itself pulsed with an unnatural color. The old woman's expression remained unreadable. Guardian venom. Maeva nodded. I know. No. The healer quietly replaced the bandage. You know what bit you. She looked directly into Maeva's eyes. You do not know what it leaves behind. A cold silence settled over the room. Maeva had treated poisonous bites before. Snake venom, spider venom, even cursed plants. This looked different. The healer stood and crossed toward a long wooden table covered with medicines. Without turning around, she asked, Why did you climb that tree? My mother. The answer came immediately. The medicine stopped working. Silence again. The old woman finally looked back. You climbed toward death for someone else. Maeva frowned. I climbed toward hope. For the first time, the healer almost smiled. Almost. Before either woman could speak again, the chamber door opened. The man from the forest stepped inside. He had changed clothes. The dark riding cloak was gone. In its place was a simple black tunic beneath a long charcoal coat embroidered only at the cuffs. Nothing about him seemed extravagant, yet everything about him carried quiet authority. He stopped beside the bed. How is she? The question was directed to the healer. Alive, she answered calmly. For now. Maeva noticed the smallest tightening in his jaw, barely visible, yet unmistakable. How long? He asked. The healer did not answer immediately. Instead, she reached for a small crystal vial resting beside the bed. She uncorked it, held it beneath Maeva's nose, watched her pupils carefully. Only then did she speak. The venom has slowed. A pause. It has not surrendered. The room became very still. Maeva looked between them. Tell me. Neither responded. She repeated herself. Tell me the truth. The healer folded her hands. Guardian venom does not simply poison. It chooses. Maeva stared. What does that mean? It searches for weakness. It settles. If your body defeats it, you live. And if it does not, another silence. The stranger finished the sentence. You have 3 days. 3 days. Maeva absorbed the words without blinking. 3 days. Everything she had done, everything she had sacrificed, every careful calculation, reduced to 3 days. Oddly, she felt no panic, only disappointment. My mother, she whispered. The stranger answered before anyone else could. A messenger has already been sent. Maeva looked up. What? She knows you're alive. She knows where you are. You will not leave her wondering. For several seconds, Maeva simply stared at him. No one had ever solved one of her burdens before she asked. She had never expected anyone to. Thank you. The words felt strangely unfamiliar. He nodded once. Nothing more. As though gratitude had never been required. The healer gathered fresh herbs into a mortar. I need more supplies. She left the room without another word. The heavy wooden door closed behind her. Silence returned. Only the two of them remained. Maeva looked toward the window. You still haven't told me who you are. He stood quietly for a moment, almost as though deciding whether names mattered. Finally, I am Kale. She smiled faintly. I already knew that. Another brief silence. Then footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the corridor. Voices. Several armored guards. One hurried inside before stopping abruptly. He immediately dropped onto one knee. My king. The council is waiting. Maeva slowly turned toward the man beside her. King. The word echoed through her mind. The stranger who had carried her through the forest. The man who had stayed beside her bed. The man who had personally sent word to her mother. Was not merely a traveler. He was the Alpha King of Valdemar. Kale looked neither embarrassed nor proud. He simply answered, They can wait. The guard hesitated. My king, today's council concerns the eastern border. I said. Kale repeated quietly, They can wait. The guard lowered his head immediately. Yes, your majesty. He disappeared into the corridor. The door closed once more. Maeva could no longer hide her confusion. You postponed your council. For me. Kale looked at the bandaged wound around her ankle, then back into her eyes. His answer came without hesitation. I do not leave people behind. The words were simple, but something deep inside Maeva shifted. All her life, everyone had expected her to carry every burden alone. This man had known her less than a single day, yet he had chosen to stay, and for reasons she could not explain. That frightened her far more than the venom. The fever came just before sunset. There had been no warning, no gradual weakness, no aching muscles. One moment Maeva was watching the last streaks of golden light creep across the stone floor. The next, the room dissolved around her. Heat flooded her body with terrifying speed. Her breathing became uneven. The ceiling blurred. The wall seemed impossibly far away. She heard voices. Someone called her name. She could not answer. Elida reached the bedside first. It has begun. She placed one hand against Maeva's forehead. Her expression hardened. Kale. He was already beside her. What do you need? Boiling water. Fresh willow bark. And no one interrupts us. He moved immediately. No hesitation. No unnecessary questions. Within moments, everything she requested was in the room. Even Elida noticed. You were faster than my assistants. I did not wait for them. She gave a brief nod. Then all of her attention returned to Maeva. The poison was no longer fighting her body. It was becoming part of it. Guardian venom never rushed. It settled, patiently, searching, waiting, choosing. Elida had seen it before. Very few survived this stage. She crushed herbs together with practiced precision before pouring the dark liquid between Maeva's lips. Most of it spilled. Very little remained. It isn't enough, she whispered. Kale looked at her. What else? There is nothing else. Silence filled the room. Only Maeva's strained breathing broke it. Hours passed. Night covered the castle. Servants quietly lit candles before leaving again. The physicians came, examined her, shook their heads, left without offering false hope. The chamber gradually emptied, until only 3 people remained. Maeva, Elida, and Kale. Finally, even Elida stood. I need to prepare another treatment. She gathered several empty jars, then paused beside him. You should sleep. No. You have council tomorrow. It can wait. She studied him for a long moment. You have already delayed enough. He answered without looking away from Maeva. Not yet. Elida quietly left. The heavy wooden door closed. The room became still. The candlelight danced softly across the stone walls. Kale remained seated beside the bed. He had intended to stay only until midnight. Then perhaps another hour. Now, he had completely lost track of time. Outside, the castle continued functioning without him. Messages waited unanswered. Generals waited. Nobles waited. The kingdom waited. None of it seemed as urgent as the woman struggling simply to breathe. He did not fully understand why. Near midnight, Maeva finally spoke. Not consciously. The fever spoke through her. Mother. Her voice barely existed. I'm sorry. Kale leaned slightly closer. She was not speaking to him. She wasn't speaking to anyone. I almost found enough. Just a little more. Please don't climb the stairs. Her breathing caught. I'll fix it. I always fix everything. The words struck him harder than he expected. Not because of what she said. Because of what she believed. She truly thought every burden belonged to her alone. Even now, standing between life and death, she was apologizing for failing someone else. Another hour passed. The fever worsened. Maeva reached weakly toward empty air, searching for something. Someone. Without thinking, Kale took her hand. Her trembling fingers instinctively closed around his. Almost immediately, her breathing slowed. Only slightly, but enough for him to notice. Enough for Elida to notice when she quietly returned. She stopped in the doorway, observed the scene, said nothing. Instead, she crossed the room silently and replaced several dying candles. Only after several minutes did she speak. You should let go. Kale looked at their joined hands. I know. He made no movement. Neither did Maeva. Elida watched both of them, then quietly asked, Do you know why guardian venom is feared? Kale remained silent. It attacks more than the body. It isolates. It convinces the victim they are completely alone. She looked at Maeva sleeping fitfully. Sometimes, the strongest medicine is proving that belief wrong. Neither of them spoke again. Just before dawn, the fever finally eased. Not broken, but weaker. Maeva's breathing became more regular. The violent trembling stopped. Exhaustion replaced agony. She fell into the deepest sleep she had known since arriving. Only then did Kale slowly release her hand. He leaned back in the chair. For the first time in nearly 2 days, his eyes closed. Sleep claimed him almost instantly. When morning sunlight finally entered the chamber, Maeva opened her eyes. Everything felt quieter, lighter. The burning inside her body had faded. She turned her head slowly. Across the room, Kale still sat in the wooden chair, fast asleep. His head rested awkwardly against the wall. His cloak hung loosely over one shoulder. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked, not like a king, simply like a man who had refused to leave. Maeva stared silently. No one had ever stayed. Not like this. She looked down. Her fingers still remembered the warmth of another hand. And for reasons she could not explain, that memory frightened her far more than nearly dying. Because if she allowed herself to depend on someone, she might one day lose them. And Maeva had spent her entire life making sure she never needed anyone. The chamber door creaked open. Elida stepped inside. She glanced once at the sleeping king, then at Maeva. A knowing expression crossed her face. Very quietly, she said, He never left your side. Maeva looked back toward the sleeping man. For the first time, She realized the danger was no longer only the venom. It was the walls she had spent a lifetime building around her own heart. By the 5th morning, the fever was gone. Not completely. It lingered like smoke after a fire. But the battle inside Maeva's body had finally begun to turn. She sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Her injured ankle protested immediately. A dull ache. Manageable. Alive. Elida examined the bite in silence. The angry violet color had faded. The dark veins beneath Maeva's skin had begun to retreat. Slowly, almost reluctantly. When she finished changing the bandage, she stepped back. You are no longer dying. Maeva released a breath she had not realized she was holding. But, Elida continued. You are not healed. Maeva smiled faintly. I expected as much. The venom leaves scars. Not all of them can be seen. The words lingered in the room long after Elida returned to her workbench. Maeva understood exactly what she meant. Later that afternoon, she insisted on walking. Only a few steps. From the bed to the window. Nothing more. Each movement demanded concentration. Her ankle trembled beneath her weight. Still, she refused help. Halfway across the room, her balance shifted unexpectedly. Before she could fall, a steady hand caught her elbow. She looked up. Kale, I had it. You almost didn't. I was adjusting. You were falling. Maeva sighed softly. I dislike being rescued. I noticed. There was no mockery in his voice. Only quiet amusement. To her own surprise, she laughed. It was brief. Barely more than a breath. Yet it was the first genuine laugh either of them had heard since meeting. Kale looked at her for a moment, as though committing the sound to memory. Together, they reached the window. Outside, the castle gardens stretched beneath the afternoon sun. Children chased one another across the courtyard. Stable hands worked beside the training grounds. Servants carried baskets filled with fresh bread. Life continued. Ordinary. Peaceful. Maeva watched quietly. I imagined castles differently. How? Louder. They usually are. She glanced sideways. So why isn't this one? Kale rested his hands lightly against the stone windowsill. Because everyone has been trying not to disturb you. She blinked. What? The physicians. The servants. The guards. They all knew someone was fighting for her life. He said it so naturally, as though an entire castle adjusting its rhythm for one stranger required no explanation. Maeva looked back toward the courtyard. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. No one had ever rearranged their life because she was hurting. She had always been the one adjusting for everyone else. That evening, a messenger arrived. A small leather pouch rested in his hands. For Lady Maeva. She frowned. My mother? The messenger smiled. A letter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was immediately familiar. My dearest Maeva, a young soldier arrived 2 days ago. He brought medicine, fresh food, and enough herbs to last through the season. He told me not to worry. He never said who sent them. He did not have to. Whoever this king is, he has shown my daughter more kindness than fate ever has. Come home when you are strong. Not before. I have waited this long. I can wait a little longer. Love always, Mother. Maeva read the final line twice. Then a third time. Very quietly. She folded the letter. Kale stood several steps away, giving her privacy. He had not asked what it said. She appreciated that. You sent all of this. It wasn't a question. He answered honestly. Yes. You never told me. You already had enough to carry. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her. There was no expectation. No debt. No attempt to earn gratitude. He had simply seen a problem and solved it. The next morning, Maeva found Elida arranging dried herbs near the window. Can I ask you something? You already are. Maeva smiled despite herself. Why did he stay? Elida continued sorting herbs. You should ask him. I asked you. I know. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Elida placed another bundle onto the shelf. When Kale was 16, he lost someone because he arrived too late. Maeva looked up. Elida's hands stopped moving. He has never forgiven himself. She offered nothing more. No names. No details. Only one carefully chosen truth. Maeva understood. This was never about duty. Never about obligation. Somewhere inside him, a wound had recognized another wound. That afternoon, Maeva finally walked into the castle garden. Slowly, carefully, each step stronger than the last. Kale happened to be there. Or perhaps, he had known she would come. Neither mentioned it. They walked together without speaking. The silence felt different now. Comfortable. Natural. As they reached the edge of the garden, Maeva stopped beside a flowering tree. I've spent my whole life believing I had to survive alone. She spoke without looking at him. If I depended on someone, I could lose them. The breeze carried away the last words. Kale stood quietly beside her, then answered with the same calm certainty she had come to recognize. Depending on someone is not the same as surrendering yourself. She turned toward him. He continued. It simply means someone else is willing to carry the weight with you. Neither spoke again. The afternoon sun settled softly across the garden. Birdsong drifted through the trees. For the first time in years, Maeva allowed herself to imagine a future she had never planned for. A future where every burden did not belong to her alone. It was a beautiful thought, which was precisely why it terrified her. Because hope was always the hardest thing to risk. Just then, a castle guard ran toward them at full speed. My king. He stopped, breathing hard. The scouts have returned. They found fresh tracks near the eastern forest. Kale's expression changed instantly. What kind of tracks? The guard swallowed. The Guardian. A heavy silence fell. The serpent, the guard continued, has left the ancient tree. Maeva felt the blood drain from her face. Guardian serpents never abandoned their territory. Never. If it had left the tree, then it was no longer protecting the forest. It was searching for someone. No one spoke. The garden suddenly felt colder. The Guardian left the tree? Maeva whispered. That's impossible. Elida had taught generations of healers the oldest rule of the eastern forest. Guardian serpents did not wander. They were bound to the ancient trees they protected. They watched. They judged. They punished. But they never hunted. Never. Kale looked toward the captain of the guard. Who confirmed the tracks? 3 separate scouts. They all reported the same thing. The serpent crossed the river before dawn. Maeva's heart sank. The river marked the edge of the Guardian's territory. Nothing had ever crossed it. Not in living memory. Within the hour, the castle's war room filled with officers. Maps covered the great oak table. Messengers hurried in and out. Reports arrived almost faster than they could be read. Kale stood at the center of the room. Calm. Focused. Every commander watched him. The villages? They've already been warned. The roads? Closed before sunrise. The forest? Nobody enters. Orders spread through the castle with practiced precision. Yet something about the reports bothered him. The attacks made no sense. No livestock had been taken. No travelers had disappeared. No hunters had been found dead. The serpent had been seen, but it had harmed no one. It was moving, searching, as though following something only it could sense. Maeva remained in Elida's chamber. She tried reading. She tried organizing herbs. She even attempted to grind dried roots into powder. Nothing held her attention. Her thoughts kept returning to one impossible question. Why? The Guardian had bitten her. It should have returned to the tree. Its duty was finished. Instead, it had abandoned centuries of instinct. There had to be a reason. Elida quietly watched her pace across the room. You are thinking too loudly. Maeva stopped. I keep replaying that day. The tree. The bite. The fall. I must have missed something. What? I don't know. Elida looked toward the window. Memory is curious. It often reveals truth only after fear has left. That evening, a soldier arrived carrying Maeva's satchel. We recovered the last of your belongings. My scissors were lodged high in the branches. Maeva accepted the worn leather bag. Most of its contents were familiar. Glass jars, cloth wrapping, small knives. Nothing unusual. Until a folded piece of bark slipped from the inner pocket. She frowned. She had never placed bark inside her satchel. Carefully unfolding it, she discovered faint markings burned into its surface. Not writing. Not exactly. Ancient symbols. Half erased by time. Elida froze. Where did you get that? I don't know. It was inside my satchel. The old healer took the bark carefully. Her face lost all color. I've seen these markings once before. Maeva looked at her. Where? In the royal archives. Silence. They belong to the first Guardians. An hour later, Kale joined them. Elida laid the ancient bark across the table. I believe she carried this out of the tree. Kale examined the symbols. Recognition flickered across his face. I know this seal. Maeva stared. You do? He nodded slowly. It predates the kingdom. The oldest records describe it. What does it mean? Neither Kale nor Elida answered immediately. Finally, Elida spoke. It is not a warning. It is an invitation. Maeva blinked. An invitation? The ancient trees sometimes chose keepers. Very rarely. Only when the balance between forest and kingdom was about to change. Maeva shook her head. No. I climbed that tree to steal medicine. I wasn't chosen. You were bitten. Elida corrected quietly. But you survived. Again. Silence. Late that night. Unable to sleep. Maeva walked slowly onto the castle balcony. Moonlight covered the valley below. The eastern forest stretched across the horizon like a dark sea. Footsteps approached. Kale. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, I've been wondering. Maeva broke the silence. What? You never asked why I risked everything for my mother. He smiled faintly. I already knew. She turned toward him. How? You carried only enough jars for one harvest. If you had come for wealth, you would have brought more. You climbed for necessity, not greed. Maeva laughed softly. You notice everything. I try. She looked toward the forest again. I've spent years believing every problem had a logical answer. And now I'm standing in a castle, being told an ancient serpent might have chosen me for something no one understands. She sighed. I don't like mysteries. No. Kale smiled. You like plans. She looked at him. And you? I've learned. Some plans only become visible after the first step. She thought about those words. About the forest. About surviving. About him. Perhaps. Not everything worth finding could be calculated in advance. A horn suddenly echoed across the valley. One blast. Then another. Then a third. Every guard on the castle walls turned toward the eastern forest. Torches appeared among the distant trees. Moving. Slowly. Not toward the villages. Not toward the roads. Straight. Toward Valdemar. The captain burst onto the balcony. My king. Kale stepped forward. What happened? The captain struggled to catch his breath. Our scouts. They found the Guardian. Maeva held her breath. The captain looked directly at her. It isn't attacking. It stopped at the edge of the forest. And it refuses to move. Kale frowned. What? The captain swallowed. Because it keeps staring toward the castle. As if it's waiting. For Lady Maeva.